The day I earned a town's laughter began with a key that wouldn't fit any lock. Louisa pressed it into my palm as our buckboard rattled through goat heads toward a house, slumped like a tired mule. "It's ours, Papa?" she asked. Shingles curled. Windows were blind with dust. A crowd waited. Chester Carter had the front like a foreman, vest tidy, smile sly. He raised his voice so even Mercy Whitmore across the road would hear. "Zayn Brooks brought his girl to see their fortune," he said. "Enough lumber to warm a stove one winter." Laughter broke, easy and mean at him. Why Uncle's lawyer had handed me the deed that morning with shaking hands. "Unusual bequest," he'd said, relieved to be rid of it. I didn't ask questions. Grief made them feel impolite. Louisa hopped down, 11 and quick, and found the boards that bowed least. "Listen," she said. The house answered with old sounds, timber coughing. A hollow knock under the porch when I pressed my heel, like a second voice. "Worthless," Chester announced, boot on the first stair. "Because I'm generous. I'll take it for 50 and a handshake." "Keep the girl. I've no use for." "Step off my porch," I said. My neck burned. My hand stayed steady. Louisa's fingers found the doorframe. "Papa," she whispered. "There's writing." Weather scrape at first. Then the grooves made a pattern. Tight chevrons, small circles, a run of dashes repeating like a tapped beat. Low at a child's eye, then higher, then high enough a man had to reach. Not letters, not brands I knew. Mercy crossed the road without hurry. Laughter felt a breath. She laid her palm to the wood as if to listen. When she met my eyes, it wasn't pity, it was warning made of recognition. "Keep that door shut," she said, "and put the key away." Chester snorted. "Don't let the old woman spook you." 60. Last offer before the bank calls it a hazard. He scraped the carving with his nail, trying to pry meaning loose, then turned the grin back on. I looked at Louisa. Her lip was caught between her teeth the way her mother used to encourage cost something. Wind moved through dry grass like pages turning. I pocketed the key. "We're staying." Chester's smile tightened. "Suit yourself. I'll visit tomorrow to see if sense has set in." He swung the crowd back to laughter. Only Mercy remained. "Your uncle wasn't a fool," she said. "Be careful enough to deserve him." "I don't understand what this is," I said, touching the cuts. "You will," she answered. To Louisa, gentler. "If the house speaks again, tell him." "It already did," Louisa said. Her mouth moved. Almost a smile. And she left us to the creak of quiet. I kept my hand on the marks until the wood warmed. Which man did I intend to be? The joke they'd made of me, or the heir my uncle imagined? I didn't have the answer. I did have work. First task, learn the language of the door. Whatever those carvings meant, they were worth more than the crowd's laughter and Chester's money. And if he wanted what was mine, he could pay by the letter, starting tomorrow. That night, the wind pushed at the walls like a drunk looking for a fight. Louisa slept curled against me under the threadbare quilt we'd found in the trunk by the hearth. The house moaned when it cooled, but something deeper thudded beneath. The floor, rhythmic, like breathing. I told myself it was the bones of old timber settling. Come morning, Louisa was up before I was. "It's under us," she said. I heard it knock back. I knelt where the sound had echoed strongest. The boards had been reset, but not by a carpenter, by someone hiding something. One plank had a split too clean to be natural. I wedged my pocket knife in and lifted. Beneath, a black void swallowed the sun. I lit the lantern and lowered myself down, boots scuffing into hard-packed earth. A cellar, but not the kind for potatoes. Stone walls, iron brackets, a locked chest buried halfway into the dirt. Papers spilled beside it, crumbling, ink faded but legible in places. Not just land claims, surveys, mineral right filings, signed. Affidavits with county seals. There was a hand-drawn map. The river's path marked in red, a line scratched across the land like a vein full of gold. Louisa dropped down beside me, holding the lantern high. "Did Grandpa hide treasure?" "Not treasure," I said, but my voice was hollow. Power. A sealed letter waited atop the chest. My name inked in my uncle's precise hand. I opened it with a thumb along the wax. Zayn, if you're reading this, they've made their move. Chester and his ilk never forgave me for outbidding them. What's under this land matters more than they want known. If the sheriff comes asking, assume he's bought. If you love your daughter, don't. Trust a soul, but mercy. I exhaled through my teeth. The weight of it all pressed down. The silence, the rot above, the chill in the stone walls. My uncle hadn't left me a broken house. He'd left a war chest disguised as ruined. We bundled the documents into an oilcloth and reburied the chest. I replaced the boards and scrubbed away our tracks with a broom. Louisa worked like she'd done it before. Eyes sharp, questions quiet. Back upstairs, she whispered. They'll come back, won't they? They will. What will we do? I looked out the cracked window, toward the town that had laughed and would likely do worse next. We'll wait. We'll watch. And when they come, we'll make sure they leave with less than they brought. Louisa didn't ask what that meant. She nodded once, a girl who understood that fear has its own kind of fuel. I slid the oilcloth under a loose plank in the hearth. The floor creaked like it had memorized our weight. Above, wind rattled again, louder this time, impatient. I gripped the key that had once seemed useless. Now it felt heavy with intent. They came 2 days later, Chester Carter on a buckskin horse, flanked by Sheriff DS and 3 armed men on borrowed saddles. Dust clung to their boots like they'd marched straight out of a threat. I saw them before they even crested the hill. Louisa spotted the glint off a rifle barrel. They're here, she said, her voice flat that I didn't answer. Just slid the oilcloth deeper into the chimney base, behind the broken flue, and told her to sit by the hearth and say nothing unless I spoke to her. She nodded, clutching the wooden carving knife we'd found upstairs. Not a weapon, but a piece of comfort shaped like one. When they reached the porch, Chester didn't bother with pleasantries. Heard you been digging, he said. That I stayed in the doorway. Just sweeping. The sheriff swung down. DS had a thick beard, eyes like burned coal, and a badge pinned crooked on his vest. He didn't look tired. He looked hungry. You hiding something under this place, Brooks? He asked. Hiding from your breath. One of the men snorted. The sheriff didn't. You've been accused of illegal excavation and unregistered mineral extraction. Got cause to search the premises. By whose authority? He tapped the 10-star. This one. You can come quiet, or I can make it loud. Chester leaned on the railing, real casual. We offered him money. Boy thinks this dump is worth more than gold. It is, I said, voice low. Because it's mine. The sheriff took a step forward, hand brushing his holster. Think of your little girl. You want to see her in state custody? Or buried in the hills with a bullet meant for you? Louisa stood. I wanted to scream for her to sit, to hide, but she crossed the room slow and calm and put her hand in mine. My fingers nearly trembled from holding back. I got nothing to hide, I said. Go ahead. Look, their boots clomped across the floor. When DS reached the plank, I almost laughed. His foot missed it by half an inch. He stomped, frowned, stomped again. Nothing gave. Where's the hole? Chester asked. Maybe your men found a rabbit burrow and confused it for treasure, I said. Or maybe your informant lied. They scoured the house. Upstairs. Out. Back. Even lifted the outhouse seat. Nothing. Eventually, DS pulled out a scrap of paper from his coat. If you so much as touch the land again with a shovel, I'll come back with chains. You won't see your girl for a decade. Then I won't use a shovel, I said. Maybe I'll just watch the rain and count stars. Chester smirked, but it wasn't confident anymore. You're playing with fire, Zayn. Better than choking on smoke. They left with curses muttered and spurs jangling. I didn't. Exhale until their horses were specks on the ridge. Louisa spoke first. Did we win? Not yet, I said. But we're still standing. And that's more than my uncle ever got to do. They didn't wait long. The sheriff came back alone that night, quieter this time. No men, no warrant, just the squeal of his boots in the dust and the slow knock of a man pretending to be friendly. I opened the door with the lantern in hand. He stood with one hand on his belt buckle and the other fiddling with a matchstick he didn't light. "Off the record," he said. Louisa was asleep upstairs. The old stairs groaned if she so much as rolled over. I knew she could hear everything. "I got no record player," I said, holding the door only halfway open. DS stepped in anyway. His eyes moved around like they had their own noses, sniffing. Corners, floor seams, shadows, Chester's wound tight. "Thinks you're sitting on gold, oil, maybe the devil's tongue itself." I told him to back off. Man's got a daughter, after all. He sat down without invitation and leaned forward, elbows on knees, as if we were just two ranchers chewing over crops. "But I ain't cheap, Zayn. You want protection? You give me half. The papers. Whatever's signed. You're the sheriff." He smiled like I'd told a joke. "Yeah. Which means I know how bad it gets when a man's accused of assaulting an officer, or harboring false claims, or, God forbid, loses his temper with a child around. They take the child, you know, real quick." I kept my hand still. My blood wasn't that he leaned closer. 50-50. You get peace, I get paid, and nobody digs any graves. I stood. "You'll have your answer by tomorrow." His grin spread like an oil slick. "Thought you'd be reasonable." He stood, too, brushed off his knees like he hadn't just threatened to destroy my life. "You got until sundown. Then I can't help you anymore." When he was gone, I locked every door and stacked furniture in front. Louisa tiptoed down. "Are we leaving?" she whispered. "Not tonight," I said. "But soon." She sat on the floor, folding her legs under her. "You lied. You said we'd stay." I looked at her, my daughter with eyes too old for her age, forced to carry weight she hadn't earned. Sometimes staying is dying. We packed what we could. The documents went into a false bottom saddlebag I built using an old tool case and scrap leather. We'd leave before dawn, cut east through the cattle trails. No main road, no town farewells. I left the porch light burning. Let them think. We were home. I stared at the carvings on the doorframe one last time, tracing them with my thumb. I didn't know what they meant, but they were part of a truth no one could bury under threats or signatures. Louisa pulled her blanket tighter. "Where will we go?" To someone who still remembers what honor looks like. Her small voice, fierce in the dark. "Mercy?" I nodded. The wind picked up again, brushing the house like it wanted to speak. But we had no time left to listen. We slipped out before the sky bruised with dawn, just two silhouettes against the rim of scrubland. I'd lashed the saddlebag tight beneath the mule's frame, and Louisa rode light behind me, arms around my waist, holding on like I was something solid in a world that had turned to water. I knew these trails, used them when I was young, rustling cattle in and out of canyons where no lawman dared chase. But this time, I wasn't a boy testing fences. I was a father running for our lives. We took the wash path through Split-Jaw Gulch, where the rocks hem in like teeth. The air was cold and tight. I kept glancing back, but there was no sound yet. No riders. "Papa," Louisa whispered. "What? If they catch us?" "They won't." "What if they do?" "Then I bite before they do." She didn't laugh. I didn't expect her to. An hour later, hoofbeats. Not from behind, but to the north, echoing off the cliffs. Chester. Or DS. Maybe. Both. I swung us off trail into the dry riverbed, hooves sinking in silt. The sun was rising now, washing everything in blood-orange light. We cut through a bend and found ourselves staring at a rock wall. Dead end. Behind us, shouts. Hooves closing. Louisa slid off and ran her hand along the cliff. "There," she said. I followed her eyes. A cleft in the stone, narrow as a doorway. Maybe wide enough for the mule if he sucked in his ribs. I didn't think. I dismounted, grabbed his reins, and shoved that he fought me, ears back, but Louisa whispered to him. Soft nonsense, same tone she used when brushing his mane, and somehow he moved that I scraped both shoulders going through. My coat tore on the stone, and the saddlebag nearly caught. Louisa came last, turned sideways, one hand pressed to the rock to keep balance that we emerged in a box canyon filled with yucca and silence. I turned and saw dust clouds on the ridge behind us. The riders reined in, swearing, searching the canyon's mouth. They lost us, I breathed. For now, Louisa said. She was right. We didn't have long. I studied the sun. We'd need to move east, cross the arroyo, and double back toward Mercy's place. She lived off the landline maps, near the old Spanish well. I remembered where the rock stacks pointed the way as we rode. I couldn't shake the image of DS's smile. That smug confidence, like he owned the law, the land, even time itself. But not Louisa. He'd never touch her. I'd see to that, one way or another. The trail narrowed, then opened again into a hollow with a rusted windmill creaking in the breeze. Mercy's house squatted on the hill beyond, half hidden by cottonwoods. The porch light was on. Louisa looked up at me. You think she'll help? I nodded once. She's the last honest person I know. The mule plodded forward. My ribs ached. My legs burned. But my grip never loosened on the reins or the saddlebag. The war my uncle had warned about was no longer coming. It was already here, and I was done running. Mercy Whitmore didn't flinch when we knocked just before sunrise. She opened the door in her nightgown, a rifle tucked behind the doorframe, and no fear in her face. Took you longer than I figured, she said. Get inside. Louisa was asleep before the tea kettle finished screaming. Mercy tucked her into the spare cot with the tenderness of someone who'd once held a child of her own and maybe lost them. She never said. I didn't ask. She sat me at the kitchen table and lit a lamp, her eyes steady on mine. I suppose you found the cellar, she said. I nodded, then laid the saddlebag on the table. And the letter said you were the only one I could trust. Mercy reached under the sink and brought out a metal tin wrapped in oilskin. Inside, documents identical to the ones we'd found, stamped and notarized by a federal land officer dated 4 years prior. Your uncle wasn't just fighting over dirt, she said. He had proof, signed filings, mineral rights, even water claims that predate Carter's fences. That river's gonna shift east come spring. This land'll be the only drink left for miles. I ran a hand down my face. Why didn't he go public? He tried, she said. But DS got to the judge back then, and Carter has the newspaper editor in his pocket. Your uncle was planning to bring it straight to Judge Harrison in Millbrook. Real lawman. But he died before he could ride out. My jaw clenched. So now I do it. Mercy pushed a folded letter across the table. Take this too. It's a personal statement from me. I witnessed the bribes. Saw DS hand Carter a coin purse big enough to drown a conscience. I pocketed it, but outside, dust kicked up on the trail. Hoofbeats again. Mercy peeked through the slats of her shutter. 2 riders. One's DS. Other's Carter. I moved. Toward the back door. No, she said, crossing to the hearth. She pressed on a section of brick that slid loose, revealing a passage behind the chimney. Old Spanish Trail comes right past here. You follow it south till you see 3 stacked stones, then turn east. That'll bring you to Millbrook without crossing the main road. I touched her shoulder. You're risking your life. I'm old, she said. They don't think old women know how to lie or fight. Louisa stirred as I bundled the documents. Papa, time to finish this, I said. Mercy kissed Louisa's forehead. Your daddy's about to teach some bad men how the truth feels when it comes with teeth. I saddled the mule behind the house, sky turning gray with the threat of another hot day. The trail Mercy had spoken of was hidden beneath thick brush, but I found it as I rode off. I looked back once. Mercy was standing on the porch, rifle in hand, framed in the doorway like a statue carved out of grit and smoked by the time Carter. And DS reached her gate. I was already miles ahead, the papers against my chest like armor. Millbrook was still waking when I rode in, covered in dust and sweat. Louisa clinging behind me, her cheek against my back. The courthouse sat atop the hill like a stone promise. I tied the mule out front and carried the saddlebag like it might explode if jostled. Judge Harrison's clerk tried to wave me off until I dumped the first 3 pages of mineral deeds onto his desk. That got his attention that we were ushered in. Judge Harrison looked like a man who hated being interrupted and hated corruption even more. Gray beard, eyes sharp, temper buried under good breeding. He didn't smile when I explained. He didn't frown either. He just read that he asked questions in short, hard sentences. I answered with what I had. Uncle's letter, Mercy's statement, the notarized maps. He studied the documents longer than I expected, then looked up. This is substantial. Will it hold? He leaned back. If it's real, and I believe it is, it doesn't just hold. It breaks Carter's back. Before I could breathe, the doors burst open. Chester Carter, red-faced and shouting. Sheriff DS behind him, hand on his holster. That man's a thief. Chester roared. He stole my claims, broke into my house, and he's using a forged deed to steal federal land. DS nodded solemnly, playing the role. Judge Harrison didn't flinch. Sheriff, are you arresting this man? I am. On what grounds? DS started to answer, but Harrison raised a hand. No, let me guess. False claims, maybe trespassing, perhaps endangering a minor. He turned to me. Did you bring your daughter? She's outside. Safe. Good, Harrison said. Then turned back to DS. Because you're under arrest. The silence hit like a dropped anvil. DS blinked. What? I've seen Mercy Whitmore's testimony. I've cross-referenced these claims with federal archives. These documents were filed years ago legally. You, however, accepted bribes to ignore them. And Mr. Carter, Chester's mouth twitched. You submitted false claims on contested property while actively threatening the rightful heir. That's fraud and conspiracy. DS reached for his weapon. I was faster. I didn't draw, but I stood between him and the door, between him and Louisa. Try it, I said. Please. He hesitated. 1 second. Then Harrison's bailiff appeared from the side chamber, shotgun leveled. That did it. DS dropped the holster. Chester tried to lunge at the saddlebag, but I grabbed him by the coat, slammed him into the judge's bench, and felt a decade of humiliation burn off me like steam. I used to admire you, I whispered. Now I hope prison teaches you what hunger feels like. He went down with a grunt. Harrison snapped his fingers. Take them both, and send word to the federal marshal. We'll need restitution orders and land rollbacks processed immediately. The bailiff cuffed them. Outside, I found Louisa sitting on the courthouse steps, swinging her legs. Did we win? She asked. I looked at the sky, clearer than I'd seen it in weeks. We did, I said. And we're going home. 6 months later, our porch looked different. New lumber, painted rails, a tin roof that sang when the rain hit. But the same view, miles of scrub and sky, now green where it once burned. The river had shifted, just like the map showed, curling east like a blessing. And our well hadn't run dry since May. Louisa sat beside me, boots kicking against the post. She'd grown taller, stronger, woke up every morning before me now, fed the mule, checked the water lines. Still carried that old wooden carving knife in her belt, though. Said it was lucky. Down below, a line of wagons waited by the fence, farmers. From Dry Creek and Good Hope, and even as far as Felton. Folks who'd once laughed at us. Now they came for water, for seed grain, for a fair deal, and I gave it to them. Papa, Louisa said, holding up the day's newspaper. They sentenced Carter. 15 years. And DS too. Hard labor in Fort Morrow. I took the paper. There. It was front page. Names printed like scars finally stitched shut. Judge Harrison's reforms. Mercy Whitmore's testimony printed in full. My uncle's name cleared. Good, I said. That land they stole, it's being returned. Louisa nodded. Already started. I leaned back in the chair, hat tilted low, heart oddly quiet. Not triumphant, not gloating, just settled. Mercy came to stay with us last week. Said she was too old to live alone and too stubborn to die where she might be forgotten. She's teaching Louisa how to hunt herbs, track coyotes, and fire a rifle with her left hand. They get along like flint and steel, the markings on the doorframe. We never did translate them, but I carved a few more beneath them. My own language, a mix of numbers, names, and the date we came back. Louisa asked what they meant. They mean, we stayed, I told her, and we were worthy. That night, I sat alone in the cellar, the same place where it started. The papers were gone now, filed, settled, done. But the room felt the same. Cold. Still. Waiting. I lit a candle and set it on the old chest. Not to search, just to remember. My uncle wasn't a fool. He was a farmer who knew seeds don't bloom in plain sight. Sometimes you bury them deep and trust the hands that follow you. Outside, the wind rustled dry grass and porch flags. Inside, I let the past go with a breath. Tomorrow, there'd be more wagons, more mouths, more names added to the ledger we kept in pencil and hope. But tonight, it was just me and the quiet house that had once been mocked and now stood proud.